All right, welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. My name's Pete Deely. Sadly, today you guys are stuck with me as the host. Professor Lucas is out there teaching, and I am minding the shop here at the podcast. I will remind you that our submission coffee remains under the radar as a performance-enhancing drug. You can still get your subscription at the jiu-jitsu-mindset.com. And we'll send you a bag of coffee every month if you'd like to subscribe. We'd be grateful. We are so lucky. We get to talk to amazing people, and this week is no exception. And today we have Professor Sam Joseph. Professor Sam, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me. Like you said, we are part of a tremendous community, and I love connecting with people who are like you. You say you're new to the sport, but you've already been in the sport a little while in the community, and then the people who've been around longer. I love that cross section, and we to enjoy an incredible group of people.
I couldn't agree more. It's been remarkable to me to, people like yourself and everybody who has uh, agreed to come on the podcast. They have extraordinary accomplishments. They've done amazing things like yourself. And yet every disposition has been one of humility. We haven't had anybody come on where I've been like, oh my goodness, at the end of it, the expression never meet your heroes, right? Like it's never been something like that. Everybody's shared a set of values. I always quote Pedro Sauer when we bring that up because he talked about, hey, if you're a high level jiu-jitsu practitioner, you've had a lot of your personality refined, sort of a lot of the bad traits get squished out because you can't get there without humility. You can't get there without a certain humbleness that other sports don't really seem to offer.
Yeah.
I, I have to start with this question frequently because it fascinates me, particularly someone like you who's been so dedicated, has so much success. Had you not taken all that energy and passion and drive and put it towards jujitsu, what would you have done otherwise? What type of person what roads might you have gone down if you didn't go down the road you did?
Well, it's funny. I can answer that question without having to guess because before I opened a gym, I've had my gym, Buckhead Jiu Jitsu, for about 10 years, a little bit over 10 years.
Right.
But before that, I was in sales and sales leadership.
Okay.
I started in telecom, like back when long distance was a thing. I'm kind of dating
Yeah,
myself.
that's all right. You and I are of the same vintage.
Been long distance. And I was literally talking to one of my students about this the other day, how right now wireless and wireless data is such a huge part of our lives. That's how we're doing this
Sure.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
I was around when we were first kicking off wireless data on phones, like 2.5G, right? Two and a half generation,
Yeah.
2.5. And I remember I was one of those people like, don't take my investment advice because I was like, data on phones, that's stupid.
Right.
But I was selling it anyway. And yeah, so I was in middle management and sales, and it was really, really interesting because I did well. And
Right.
I'd done well in sales, and then I did well managing a business to business sales team. But in order to make that next level in terms of success and money, you have to take on more responsibility. Well,
Sure.
my was that I had just enough time doing that, and I was just successful enough where I could train every night,
Yeah.
you know, fly out on the weekends and compete. Like I'd fly all over the country with
Right.
some of my and competing, and I was coming up the bell ranks. And man, I was successful. I was making money, but I had the freedom to train and to compete. And I didn't want to have more time at work and less time on the mats.
Right. Right.
And that was a big part of why I decided to open up a gym,
Right.
to quit and open up a gym. So yeah, I would probably be in sales leadership. Hopefully, impacting lives and
Yeah.
and uh, targets.
You touch on something that I find fascinating because that road of security where you knew Like you knew the formula. If I perform at these levels doing these things, the reward is there because somebody's writing a check against that. And then to go and become an entrepreneur and take the responsibility of, now it becomes purely your job to write your own check. Like you'll live and die by your own efforts. However, I would imagine that that could be a bit scary. So was that transition a difficult one, or was it just so natural? Like, I'm so passionate about this, I have to do it, and you didn't have to think about it, you just jumped.
Well, I tell people, I say often, if I had known then what I know now, right? The
Hmm.
first three were so difficult,
Right.
I wouldn't have, right?
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't have done it.
Right.
But I am glad I didn't know then what I know now, because
Right.
it's been such a huge blessing in my life. Like, I often say I thank God for jujitsu, and I mean it literally.
Right.
You know, I thank God. Um, the way jujitsu, the impact it's had on my life, how it shaped my personality,
Hmm.
how it's an area, how it's highlighted areas of my own personality for growth,
Right.
and opportunity for development. And I've gotten to share that with my family. My sister is the one who pointed me in the direction. It's the area where I opened up my gym, and I'm still there. I'm still in the first place I found,
Right.
and my sister pointed me in that direction. My mom actually works at my gym,
Okay.
and she's an employee.
Okay.
She's,
Family business.
yep, family business. My brother and his wife, I took out my life savings and I put it all in the gym, opened up with a few thousand square feet with no students. So, you start that, you're not getting a check, you're writing checks. And my brother and his wife, they helped me out. It's truly been a family business. And the cool thing is my family has grown, because each and every person, a few hundred
Yes.
people in, they came in and a little or a lot, they're like, hey, Sam, we're trusting you for what's going to become a huge part in our lives.
Right.
And it's, like I said, I don't use the phrase lightly. I thank God for
Yeah.
jujitsu, all the ways it's blessed me. And now I get to share it with I got married a couple of weeks ago. So
Congratulations.
jujitsu in the community, with my beautiful wife, Lindsay. And it's been a huge blessing in my life.
So in one of the conversations we had with Hobson Mora, he describes a very frightening moment between as his children were being born, and it's a harrowing moment. It's the safety of the babies and his wife are all, and he talks about he steps out. The doctor says something that's discouraging, and in his mind, he's like, I thought about, if I have my gi, I have everything. I go back in there, and he's fighting the fight, the psychological, spiritual fight of trying to just be there, present for his wife, and everything has an incredible outcome. For me, it was a very tangible, poignant example of the role jiu-jitsu could play in helping off the mats there. I got to imagine in those first 3 years that you might have thought, hey, wait a second, what I do, like, because all entrepreneurs go through, or most every entrepreneur goes through that same journey of, hey, it's not a straight line. Oh, it's going okay. It's not, what pipe broke in the thing, and all of a sudden, not whatever, COVID, who knows what was a part of all your, your experiences. Did your training, your physical training of jujitsu, play a meaningful role in managing your way through those first 3 years?
100%, not just those first 3 years. So for years throughout the color belts, I was in outside sales and business to business sales, and I did well.
Right.
And like ups and downs, right? The
Sure.
main difference not being an entrepreneur is that, like, you just have to fix stuff once as an entrepreneur, like ideally, right?
Sure.
You build, maybe something happens, you have to build it again. But when you're working for somebody else, every year or every quarter, there are new targets. Sometimes they make sense to you, sometimes they don't.
Right.
So my point is while I was working, jujitsu often gave me the tools to go back and be a better problem solver,
Right.
right? I'm a man of faith. If you jump on my Instagram, like, I'm pretty vocal. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. And so I credit God for using jujitsu, like before it was my job and long since, after it's been my job, was shaping me and giving me the tools. And I have conversations with some of my students and they come in and they're like, hey man, I just want to let you know that, it's the skills, some of the skills or
Yes.
some of the things
Right.
I learned myself in this place have helped me be a better father,
Yes.
better better person at work, right? A better problem solver. So yes, I not only found it in the 3 years, but I also found it before. And I'll summarize it. Literally the other day, I used this example. Um, what jujitsu will help you do, right, is become more like steel and less like iron. So, in the
Nice.
old days, when people used iron, iron was a great, you can make swords out of iron. Iron is great.
Right.
If I'm hitting something softer than it, it will penetrate it, it will break it. But as soon as it confronts real resistance, it's brittle, it breaks, right?
Right. Yes.
Steel is better because steel is strong, but it will give a little bit. And then
Yes.
that'll be successful. And I said, jujitsu teaches us how to be more like steel, not
Yes.
to be so strong that we become brittle and break,
Right.
right? But to bend a little bit when appropriate, right?
I love
And
it.
then just to have success. So
Yeah.
that's how jujitsu has helped me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Lee, I think, has a similar idea, like be like water, in the sense
Yep.
of, if you are uh, iron, you will inevitably encounter something stronger than you. And by that, I mean, there will be problems that will crush you. And if you don't have that give, I think people can get truly broken, and it takes a long time. Whereas I think a certain suppleness of spirit allows
Yes.
you to experience tragedy and suffering, as we all do, and is in our past and is always a part of the experience. I love what you're saying there, and that notion of get comfortable being uncomfortable is part of our thesis statement here. And and for me, just it resonates with me what you're saying, uh, and this may be a stretch for some people, but for me, when I'm training, given the busyness of my life, is a certain meditative, you might call it a prayerful quality of it, because it's a time in which I'm only thinking about the moment. Because when
Yeah.
my training partner Han is choking me out, there is little room for me to be thinking about the other responsibilities I have in my life, which is a rarity in the day. I have a day that is, I oversubscribe myself. I'm, like many Americans, I'm too busy all the time trying to make a lot of things work. When you went through your progression, and particularly as a salesperson, because your physical body as an outside salesperson needs to be intact, because if you're going to sit on planes, you're going to manage your way through airports, get here and get there, being injured can really present a problem for
Yeah.
the nature of the work. So I'm curious about the role of competition in your development, because as you train at that level of, you have won many, many things, so you're training at the highest of levels. um, just like we're talking about steel and iron, you ratchet up that intensity, you also ratchet up the risk of injury. So could you talk a little bit about what that meant to you psychologically, maybe even physically, and then maybe even a comment about your recommendation regarding competition, like what role could it play in people's lives?
Well, yeah, and I'll answer that, but just to piggyback on what you just said, in terms of being totally present,
Right.
right? The cool part about that is like when your training partner Han is trying to choke you, and you're totally present. When you come out of that situation, whether you get out or he chokes you, you tap, you get done. Now you can come back to those problems that you were escaping, but you're a better version of yourself. You're
Yes.
fresh,
Yeah.
refreshed,
Yeah.
right?
Good point. Yes.
So being that 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 focus, that break, oftentimes I would come back to problems that seem so crazy, so daunting,
Yes.
but then fresh perspective. So that's one way it really helped me. Now going to the competition part of it, when I was coming up, I started jujitsu in '98, right? When I was coming up, jujitsu was different in America than it is now.
Okay. Yeah.
You were lucky if you had most cities, like one really good jujitsu school. If
Right.
you had, whoa, right? And now in most major cities, you have a ton. Like in Atlanta, we have over a dozen, like really good, good jujitsu.
Right.
So back then, coaches had a lot more leeway. So practice was longer,
Right.
right? Because we're gonna go, right? You know,
Right.
we're gonna go. It was harder. It was more like high school wrestling practice. Like it was harder, 45 minutes of warm up, 30 minutes of technique, another 45 minutes of sparring, and you can't leave and you can't be late, because, and that's the only place in town, like, so like it was much more combative, like combat. Of course, you have gyms now that are focused only on competition, right?
Right. Right.
But then there's a gym 5 minutes away where
Right.
nobody can, few people compete. Most people are someplace in between. But it was much more part like coaches could walk up to you and be like, "Hey, you're competing this weekend," and you had to do everything to compete, because
Right.
if you didn't, that guy wasn't going to promote you, and you
Right.
you care about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not belt chasing, but you care. You want to see your
Yes.
progress.
Yes.
So like now, it just depends on the gym. So when I was coming up, I didn't have a choice, but I embraced it. Like I
Okay.
came up, started an alliance in Atlanta with legendary Jacare Cavalcante, and then I moved. I moved to DC, and then I got the rest of my belts from the Yamasaki brothers,
Okay.
Mario Fernandez Yamasaki, and then Francisco Neto, who's also ahead of the Yamasaki Academy. Um, and I loved it. I loved that intense approach to jujitsu. And I essentially trained like it was a competition every
Every
day.
day. Yeah.
The, when I got to LA, when I moved to LA, I did get to spend a lot of time training with Sean Williams of Penzo Gracie lineage.
Hmm.
And that was my first time seeing a different approach to training where he does a lot of like flow rolling,
Right.
right? Like changing of techniques and moving. And I made that a part of my regular schedule along with the intense training.
Right.
And it made it more enjoyable. It made it just being able to incorporate that in.
Right.
I started drilling more because of Sean. I did get the chance to spend time with Pablo Popovich as well in Florida. And that guy's like, he was incredible. I have nothing but great things to say about him. And those guys influenced me. And now I'm like a mix of all of the above.
Right.
But I still believe I go back to those early days, and competition was just a part of it. And I'm glad it was, because I don't know if I would have competed as much as I did.
Right.
And competition drove me to make technical improvements.
Right.
It enabled me and inspired me to train when otherwise maybe I wouldn't have trained. So it
Right.
pushed me to heights, right? And it also gave me, like, I've gotten to travel the world. I've
Wow.
taught a Sweden, competed in Brazil. Without competition, I might not have those opportunities and things. So
Yeah.
competition took, in jujitsu, we were kind of a niche or small community, even though
Hmm.
it's got bigger. But when you're just at your gym, it's tiny. Even if you have a huge gym, when you
Right.
compete, you start to expand that circle.
Yes.
And
Yes.
some of my best friends in the sport were guys that maybe I competed against or on other teams. And without competition, I wouldn't have even been exposed to them.
For sure.
So competition can benefit you in many ways. I tell my students, if you have the itch, then do it,
Hmm.
because there's going to come a time when work will get in the way, when your body might get in the way. So if you have the urge and the means, do it. Compete. Be honest with yourself with what you want to accomplish and how much you're willing to put into it. But if you process competition the right way, all benefits,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You
I feel
know,
the same way.
all benefits.
Yeah.
So if you decide you want to be a world champion, then you've got to see if your lifestyle and what you're willing to put into it,
Right.
right? If those support winning a world championship. If you're like, no, man, I just want to compete, against like in a master's division, people my age, and I want to travel and meet people. Okay, great. You set the expectation, you train accordingly, and you go have a blast,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And I've had who've decided to compete, and what drove them was they wanted to get as good as they possibly could,
Right.
right? And I'm like, man, if that's the inspiration you need in order to put in that work, knock yourself out. That's great. I want to support you and your goals.
Yeah, for me, a game day matters as a way to, belts are one thing, and I love the duration of time between belts, and the the notion that the it's a decision of the professor rather than a committee of, like in many karate traditions where uh, and when I think of what would have happened to me had I found jujitsu back when my body worked properly, I mean, I would have a very different relationship to it. Then I found it, my first day of class was the month I turned 50. And so I show up as somebody where nothing works right. I mean, my shoulders are embarrassing. Like it seems impossible. I got a set of disabilities effectively as a fighter, and that I refuse to accept as limitations. But it forces me to a position of humility, because if
Yeah.
I need to tap before step two. Like if I wait to step three and I'm being submitted, I'm injured on step two, which means that I have training partners that go, well, what do you mean you're tapping? And I'm like, I know that if I slip and you wrench this, now I've got big problems. And in a similar way, like you talk about thanking God for jujitsu, I mean, I have a similar disposition, and there are parts of me that go, oh, I would have so enjoyed this experience when I was a more capable athlete,
Yeah.
but instead it's now mixed up with my physicality and my character and like my connection to other people. God knows you don't want me teaching a class, but if it's your first day, I'm
Yeah.
probably capable of showing somebody something. And I enjoy, that experience, because the first day, particularly for good athletes, where they come in and they, like myself, even I couldn't understand why I was so bad. The first year I was like, will I ever learn anything? I mean, I just, which relates to my relationship to persistence, because it's one of those things that it requires a faith that if you come here and you don't give up, things will happen whether you like it or not, almost like you. And for me, competitions, uh, I like the game day, but it also is a barometer of how well I am or am not taking care of my body, because the first opponent for me is the scale. If I show up and I'm too fat to fight, that's a level of embarrassment that is hard to take. So anyway, I mean, I would have liked that experience, and perhaps over time, I will find myself improving better than I think, and compete differently. I mean, as a learner and a teacher, is learning jujitsu, maybe you could describe like the acquisition of jujitsu knowledge and technique and ability to execute that technique. How is learning that different than learning other things?
Yeah. It's that's an interesting question. But taking a step back, what you said, if I had a dollar for every time somebody said, "I wish I had found jujitsu 20 years ago,"
Right, right.
man, I wouldn't have to work, right? And maybe I just have to believe this, but I'm a big believer in the saying, the best time to start something was, yes, 20 years ago. The second best, right now.
I
And
agree.
then dive into it. And maybe when we die and we look back, we will see reasons why,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah,
And often, sometimes, even in this life, we see reasons why. You're like,
without a doubt.
with maturity, I understand why I didn't come into my success at 20, because I wouldn't have been able to handle it,
Right.
right? Or I understand. So it's really interesting when I hear that. But oftentimes, when I hear that from people, those same people, I look at them and I'm like, you have come so far in the 4 years I've known you.
Yeah.
Or you have come so, like, you are like such a tremendous example of what we're trying to do in our community. Or it's really interesting, like, to when people say that. And I just challenge people. It's so easy for us, right? It is, as Americans, we live in the lap of luxury, or
Right.
especially here historically, to think about what we don't have. And I think a little dissatisfaction is a good thing. Any
Yes. Right.
innovation is the result of a little
I
dissatisfaction.
agree.
But we have to make sure I believe like we have to make sure that that little dissatisfaction doesn't prevent us from enjoying just the riches that we have. And
Yes.
bringing jiu-jitsu, the I was thinking about this earlier today. It's a free exchange of friendship and camaraderie.
Right.
You know, and that is a gift that I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I didn't understand.
Hmm.
Like real value in sports was like the friendship and camaraderie, as well as all the benefits to me personally. But that friendship and camaraderie,
Yes. Right.
do hard with other people, and
Yes.
it helps each other to higher levels of success. And jujitsu is just such a great example of a free exchange of friendship and camaraderie. And you get the added bonuses that you're participating in a meritocracy. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
so, it's so rich. And so every day, and maybe starting at 50, and I thought you were a lot younger, by the way, so you look
No.
good. But
Thanks.
at 50, maybe you had the capacity to appreciate that maybe I didn't know you, that maybe you wouldn't have appreciated to the
Oh.
same 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Oh, if I had found this in my teens or 20s, I mean, I would have really thought about winning. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have wanted to get as good as possible, to win, as much as possible, and I would have been thinking about skill acquisition and competition disproportionately. And at 50, I came in and when I think back, when you talk about being able to read context, like what you're going on, I think about the times in which I participated in athletics at the levels that I did. And I don't really think too much about wins and losses. I think about the guys around me. And and those are the memories that come to my mind,
Yeah.
not like we won this and we won that. Yeah, that's when the camaraderie for me, one of the most important components that jujitsu offers that I don't see present in the same way in other things is that level of trust. You
Yeah.
know, everybody on the mats that I train with can submit me, I assure you. Like however, uh, I also trust that
Yeah.
nobody is going to not allow me to tap and not
Right.
allow me to be safe in my training. And
Yep.
there's no other athletic experience that I've had where there's the danger that is being expressly provoked. We're
Yeah.
trying to create a dangerous situation, and the safety that we will take you to this edge without hurting you. That dynamic between human beings is rare, and I build a level of trust where like, well, that person could have broke my arm and they didn't.
Yeah.
And that I don't have an analogy in my athletic life that looks like that, and nor outside of it. I mean, every other context that I think of, being careful from the outset is a big part of the exchange, for me at least, right? Like you never would want to to me, threatening, menacing somebody is always a bad thing. But on the mats, I mean, even if it's good natured, there's a threatening component to it
Wonder-
because, you're trying to submit somebody, right?
Right. Yeah. And you're trusting, you're participating, and you're essentially doing trust falls all
Yeah,
day.
that's a good
But
point. Yeah.
doing it, we just came back from our honeymoon and we walked up a waterfall. And we got to this one point, and the guy said, "We're going to do a trust fall." And you hear that in the beginning, but you get about halfway up, you're 35 minutes in, you've forgotten. The guy grabs you and says, "Okay, turn around, we're doing a trust fall." And he pushes you. We didn't fall far, but I remember in that split second, I'm like, well, first of all, the guy was grabbing me, and I was like, I'm not used to giving somebody else control
Yeah,
over
right.
me,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I'm about to, oh, wait, he's trying. And then before you know it, and then you fall. And I remember in that split second, you're completely trusting that there aren't rocks down
Yeah,
there and
right. Yeah.
all that. And it freaks you out for like a split second. Well, every time you roll with somebody and you tap,
Right.
you're acknowledging could have put you out,
Right.
right? Choked you or broken something.
Right.
But each they're letting go and you're completely safe. You're participating in trust both ways.
Yes.
And that feels good, especially when you look at the division in our society
Oh,
today,
yeah, without a doubt.
socially, to go to a club every day or a couple of times a week and participate in that healthy exchange of friendship and camaraderie, and then also that trust, and you're participating in a meritocracy.
Right.
Man, I wish more of our politicians would train,
Yeah,
right?
for
Maybe
sure.
they better. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It begs
Uh,
honesty,
that-
because if you want to be dishonest about the position, like you don't really have me, then
yeah.
that's, we had hiring Gracie come to our school once, and we're talking about injuries. They said, I'll tell you what, if you're injured, it's probably your fault. And at first I was like, well, hold on a second, like but as I've observed my own behavior, as I've observed behavior around me, not that, I mean, there are accidents that happen and it just is what it is. However, I've that insistence, like, you don't really have me, I can get out. Now you want to find boundaries, but there comes a point in time in which you have to honestly, concede to how it
Talk.
goes, right? It's just that you have to tap. And the absence of honesty, I think, can create a lot of injury. And for me, that's part of what you're saying, that camaraderie piece. Um,
Well, let me answer your question about the skill.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so tangent. So typically, the way I describe it to new people, when new people come to the gym, and about half the people at any given time, you come to a class, like we just had a noon class and 20 some odd people on the mat. Half the people there started brand new at our gym at some point, right?
right,
Half the people on the mat. So new people come in, I let them know that, and I'm a big believer in mixing the belt levels. I think it benefits everybody for different reasons. We have a curriculum where we focus on things like this week. We're focusing a lot on arm barring from the mount, like the basic arm bar, to specific scenarios, to more advanced applications of it.
right,
And everybody gets where they can. Everybody eats where they can. For some
right,
people, you know, um, it's a third coat of paint. For other people, now they're ready for like the fourth technique in the curriculum. Some people are at the first, but um, I tell people, I say, look, learning jujitsu is like learning a new language, right?
right, right,
Um, at first, you're only going to be able to say "Je m'appelle Sam," right?
right, right. Yeah,
And if you try to the first day try to diagram a sentence, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to go home and cry and be like, this sucks. But
yeah,
the first day you just say "Je m'appelle Sam" like 100 times, you
right,
know um and you understand there's going to be more that you don't know than what you do know, but you focus on what you do know, and then you take it, the building blocks, and you learn how to ask for coffee. You learn how
yes,
to
yes, yeah,
and then you focus on that and you keep building. And before you know it, you're having conversations with people. I
right,
said, jujitsu in the same way. If you took a language in college and you had a buddy and every day you guys ate lunch together and you only spoke French, you probably improved at a greater degree than if you didn't do that,
right,
right?
yeah,
If you watched French soap operas on TV or listen to French music, you probably improved at a great. Jiu-jitsu is the same way.
yeah,
I say if you can come and you can get on the mat on a regular basis, at least 3 times a week, then you're giving yourself a chance to learn at a nice, comfortable pace while you're giving your body the opportunity to learn the movements.
right,
You know, I tell people treat it like you're learning a new language, right?
right,
And give yourself some grace. Be patient with yourself, right? The
yes,
same way you would be patient with yourself learning a language. And that's the closest analogy that I've come to. The main difference is that jujitsu is like I often say it's like chess, but with your body. Because
yes,
it's
yes,
your mind that has to learn it. It's
yes,
your body that has to be able to actually apply it. So you need to get on the mat enough so that while you're learning it technically, your body has an opportunity to effectively apply it. And that's where you get jujitsu junkies,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You stimulate it in your mind,
yes,
and then body, you start to feel, man, my body has never, I haven't felt this good since I was a teen, or man,
yeah.
my body never moved like this. I had no idea I was this strong. I had no idea. And there you fall in love,
Yeah,
with
I could not agree more. And when Hickson uses that expression, invisible jujitsu, and all of that, to me, that's an attunement at um, at the base of the brain, not even the executive function, where over time, I think there's this back and forth between you're thinking it and doing it. And then over time, it recedes to you feel it and react without having to think it. And there's this back and forth. You can want to do something and then you do it, or you want to do something and you can't. And then over time, the way that I'm not thinking about the words coming out of my mouth before I say them to you, as you say, the language is acquired. When Professor Lucas and I started it, two goals were, hey, if you're outside and you're looking in, we want you to come in. The water's good, it's safer than you think, give it a shot. And then to not stop when you're just learning your ABCs. We call it the blue belt curse around here. You get that first belt and off you go. And although it's fair to come and get a taste of something and not commit, I also think that if people hung in past, that first year, the enjoyment of being able to converse, it would keep them in much longer. And we had a great guest named Professor Jason Hawkins. He wrote a book I love called the Jiu Jitsu Sutras, and he talks about the devotional quality of learning Jiu Jitsu, where you will go through periods of time where, for me, not only do I feel like I'm not improving, but I feel like I'm regressing, right? So I'm spending this time, I'm actually trying my best, and not only am I not getting better, I'm regressing, and that sort of internal experience can only be met with, hey, I'm gonna be patient and have faith that these things, as the teachers before me have said, if you just don't quit, there's on the other side of this mountain is more things that are going to be fun.
It's interesting what you just described. I think 100% of people who do jujitsu experience it. And some people experience it less than others, but I think everybody experiences it. And that's been the cause of way too many people quitting jujitsu. And there are
Right.
two things that one of them I stole from Batman the animated series. Have you ever seen
I'm
that?
aware
There
of
was
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Batman the animated series was great television, and anybody who's watched it will say, but
Okay.
um, Batman was it was a flashback, and he was training, and there was this guy he could never beat, and he went to his master, and he was like, I have to be the best there is, no matter what it takes. And his master just stood there calmly, and he said, "Sometimes we learn more from defeat than we
Yep.
do victory." And then Batman up, and he gives this look, and then that's the end of the scene.
Yeah.
And I saw that years ago, and the truth of it just struck me,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
To like when we don't think we're improving or we lose, almost all of my biggest achievements on the mat have come after a fall,
Right.
right? The fall or the loss or the lack of improvement, sometimes that exposes something that if you have the right attitude, you can be like, well, thank you for exposing that weakness. Now I can attack that weakness and it can become a strength. So I think about that. And the other thing that I think of when you say that is, and this is the truth too, and honestly, I forget where I first heard it, but it's sometimes when we think we're making the least improvement,
Hmm.
it's actually when we're making the most improvement, right? And it's below the surface.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
sometimes we just don't see it. And the problem is we equate what we see with all of reality. Even scientists will tell us that what we can see is not even half of what's really out
Oh,
there.
yeah. Right. Right. For sure.
And but we make the mistake of saying, well, if I can't see the improvement, it must not be there.
Right.
No, we that's when we have to have faith in the process.
Yes.
And oftentimes we can't see it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But go ask your coach. Your coach will say, no, 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 Pete, I see you improving. I had that happen to me. I was a purple belt and I almost quit jujitsu. I competed in this tournament. It was a smaller tournament, and at the time there were fewer purple belts, so the weight classes were bigger. And so I was fighting this guy who was a little bit bigger,
Right.
who had, competed very competitively with one of our senior purple belts, and who was also bigger. And he was better than me. And this guy beat me. He passed my guard twice, and I was like, training at the gym, I hadn't had my guard passed like
Yeah.
that. Man, this is as far as I've come. I suck. I'm going to quit. I'm home and I'm going to quit jujitsu. And then I get a call and I don't want to pick up. And then I get another call from one of my best friends, David Jacobs, late David Jacobs. And I pick up and he was like, "Hey man, where are you?" I said, "I'm going home." He goes, "Don't be a baby just because you we're all eating, come out to eat." He goes, "We're going XYZ place."
Yeah, yeah.
And then whatever. And then he hung up. And I was gonna drive home. I turned around, I drove to the place and I sit down, fully intending on quitting jujitsu.
Right.
And Mario Yamasaki was there. It was before Fernando came and they switched places. And I was like, Mario doesn't even like me. Like, I medaled at the pan, this is enough. Purple belt's as high as I go. Mario looks at me with a smirk on his face. And he says, you know what, Sam? Your jujitsu is so good if you just believe. And I was shocked. I think I
Right.
almost cried,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and and then he looked away and he was laughing, talking, and there was a guy right next to me. His name was Paul Bush, and he was one of our senior guys, and he was smirking at me, and he goes. I go, "Man, Mario doesn't even like me. Why would he say that?" And he was close to Mario, and he said, "Dude, you don't even understand. Mario likes you." He said he teases you because he likes you and he thinks you're so good. Your
Right.
jujitsu is so good. So I went from almost quitting.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't like it was one of the first times this guy had said anything nice to me. That next year, I won my division at the Pan.
Wow.
Um, they asked me to start teaching class at the gym, so I was a purple belt. I started teaching Tuesday nights, and it that phone call and just those two little comments. So to your point, I didn't think I was improving, but I didn't have the eyes to see it,
Yeah, right,
and
right, right.
and man, it changed the course of my jujitsu
Yeah,
journey.
yeah, imagine that. I mean, imagine had you walked away, things life would be entirely different. Yeah, and as you're talking, I think about the ways that I approach it at this juncture in life and I would have because in yoga you have shavasana, right? I mean, a corpse pose at the end where you're integrating your nervous system is integrating the things that you've learned. And sometimes I think um I don't want to say I'm trying too hard, but like I'm insisting, like, oh, I should be better at this and all the rest of it. And sometimes I notice the nature of my life doesn't allow me to train at the frequency that I'd like. I train as much as possible. But
Yeah,
sometimes in between, in the spaces in between it, my central nervous system seems to have like found a little more of a groove. And it was actually the stepping away for a minute
yeah,
that somehow or other when I came back, and I don't like to take any meaningful break, but things are what they are. Well, I could talk to you all day. Let me ask you one last question. And I'll be respectful of your time as we head to the end. My guess is you have a million stories about your observation of jiu-jitsu affecting one of your students, like along the way here. But could you pick one and just kind of tell us a story about like somebody who jujitsu was super important in their life too.
yeah. Yeah, I do have a lot of stories, and like I'm proud of the my students and some of their journeys. Like I'm so proud of them. Um, but if I had to pick one, there was a young lady who came to the gym, and she was kind of frail, like when she
Hmm.
first went in, but she had a smile, a great glow,
Right,
enthusiasm. There's a story there, right?
right.
And she came and talked to me, and she said, "Look, I've been injured." She was underwater, out of the country, hit her head,
Mm,
and there were a bunch of problems, health problems there. So she was an athlete, one,
okay.
and then she got hurt, and she went from being an athlete to being extremely frail, and
Yeah.
she won a jujitsu. So this young lady started, and at first she could barely do anything, right?
Right,
Because the demographics of the sport are what they are. Like it's essentially at a macro level, it's a young man's sport.
right,
Obviously, there's change coming to it, but like at a macro level,
right, right.
like the and so, but she was participating in it. And she was tough, and she had a fire. And make a long story short, this woman ended up not only, being getting stronger, being able to train. She became an IBJJF champion. She came in second Masters Worlds, and her father, got to watch her, got to see her compete. And she came to me one day and she said, "Sam, my father got to see me as an athlete again."
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Oh my gosh.
she she was strong. She went from being weak and being hyper aware of her own weakness to being able to revel in her strength again.
Yeah.
She was a huge part of our community, made a ton of friends, just did a lot. And she shared a lot of this story on social media as well. But that is one story that I think about that really, touches me. She's an artist, and she gifted the gym like a big mural that we
Wow.
have and in our gym. And just watching her, listening to her talk about how jujitsu enabled her to recapture her
Yeah.
vitality, to find herself again, and then to thrive, made me proud of my small part in that, and the community that we have. And that's just one of many stories. Like, I had a guy come to me, and he just said, "Hey man, I use stuff that I learned in here to make me a better husband, better brother, better friend, better at work." And when I hear things like that, it makes me really happy
Yeah.
to be part of the community, to be blessed at the role, to thank God for the role that I get to play in that. Because man, those people give me more than they say that I give them.
Yeah,
You know,
that's so yeah, that's so beautiful. And the echo of that goes on throughout their lives. When I come into our gym and I watch Professor Lucas and the team deal with the kids and the carefulness that they treat them with, and the way that they are cultivating resilience and strength and cooperation, humility, all the different values that kind of go into how we work with the kids. And I think about the way that you had that moment, you were going to quit, then somebody says something good to you, it's a pivot. That's happening all the time around us. I've tried to be mindful of my own language. Like, hey, what you say, said at the wrong time, said at the right time, can have two different, consequences and all that. So that's a great story. So the good work you're doing in the world isn't just of the moment. The 10 years plus of teaching and guiding and all the rest of it, the world's a better place because of you, Professor Sam. So thank you very much. Somebody out there might be looking to follow you, get in touch with you. How would you like them to know about where you are, and maybe someone local wants to come train with you? So
yeah. So we're Buckhead Jiu Jitsu's named because there's a Buckhead in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're
okay.
ever in Georgia. It's a great part. It's a little part of the city of Atlanta, in the city, just outside the city. Nice part of town. At Buckhead JJ on Instagram.
Okay.
Um, Follow us on Facebook. You can find Buckhead Jiu Jitsu, and then you can always follow me. Sam Joseph. You can add me on Facebook. Just put Sam Joseph Buckhead,
Okay.
or pop up. And yeah, follow me on Instagram, post a lot there. And you can find our website, buckheadjj.com. But if anybody's ever in Atlanta, I
Yeah.
really believe, I tell my students, when you travel, train other places. Some of your best friends are out there, like, at other gyms
Yeah.
and other
Yeah.
teams. You can have team pride but not be a jerk, right? You
Right.
should have,
Right. Right.
when people are in town, I love when people come by our gym,
Yeah.
you know, open doors for people to come in, get on the mat, and exchange friendship and camaraderie.
Awesome. Well, Professor Sam, thank you so much. Go follow him on Instagram. You're going to be really happy you did. And maybe another time you come back and talk to us again. But thanks for spending this time with us now.
That'd be great. Thank you, Pete.